Hi, I'm Jennifer J. Raffler, your host for the Sol2Soul Global Summit 2. Learn the truth about our sun, how it heals us, supports our spiritual evolution, and more. Today we have an amazing guest, somebody whose work was brought to my attention by our modern-day sun-gazing guru, Hira Ratan Manet. His work, at the time that I saw it, was something very new and exciting to me, something that I have not been exposed to. What was sent to me was something regarding the hidden aspects of the sun, which included at least 5 components of sunlight, and talk of light bodies. With all the research that I had been doing on the sun, this is just something totally unique. And so this very special individual who knows all these things about the sun that I never heard of before, and I'm sure that many of our viewers haven't heard of, that person is Dr. Mitchell Gibson. And Dr. Mitchell Gibson is with us today on the phone. Unfortunately, he couldn't join us via video, but he is here. I'd like to introduce him a little bit further. Dr. Mitchell Gibson and his wife, Kathy, started a business, Tybro, over 13 years ago, dedicated to bringing spiritual tools, knowledge, and understanding to a rapidly changing world. He believes that while we have evolved scientifically over the last 100 years, our spiritual growth has stagnated. We have yet to successfully plumb the depths of the human mind, understand the mysteries of the human soul, or fully integrate the emotion of love into our politics, religion, or racial relations. Dr. Gibson and Kathy's goal at Tybro is to create an inclusive environment where all races and cultures are welcome to learn under one doctrine, as we are all children of a loving Creator. Together, they have experienced hundreds of supernatural events and miracles in their lives. Dr. Gibson and Kathy have witnessed the appearance of angels, gods, elementals, spontaneous healings, materializations, aura phenomena, and a host of events that defy rational explanation. They have over 100 free videos on YouTube and a large radio and Facebook following to validate their spiritual discoveries. Dr. Gibson and his wife Kathy enjoy the work of increasing spiritual enlightenment, and they look forward to meeting and helping as many people as possible. Hi, Dr. Gibson. How are you?
I'm good. How are you this morning?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm so happy to have you here today. And
it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, my goodness. So I have to ask you, what is your connection to HRM?
I did a very successful blog post on his work on my blog, The Enlightened Perspective. And it got over 300,000 reads. And in the work, it talked about how he has been tested in looking at the sun and taking energy from the sun and not really needing to take in nourishment in the way that normal people do. And it just fascinated me that this man has been kind of ignored by mainstream science, but there is this work that I think is just absolutely brilliant and needs to be brought forward to the world. So I've never met him personally, but I have certainly spotlighted his work on my blog and talked about it during some of my seminars.
That's awesome. And the fact that he forwarded your work to me, I just thought that was amazing.
Well, one day he and I'll have to meet and formalize our connection.
That's for sure. And it's funny.
Yes.
For Sol2Soul Global Summit 1, I interviewed Stage of Bliss, and he had also forwarded me her work as well. So it's just really crazy. Small world.
Small world. Small world. Very small world.
Indeed. So what he sent to me and the materials that you forwarded to me, and thank you, by the way, you sent me a document called Solaris, The Art of Drawing Sexual and Creative Energy from the Sun, and The Human Body of Light, which you wrote both of them. And wow, they are wicked cool. And again, information that I have not encountered in all my research on the sun. So I am super grateful, and we have so much to talk about.
Yes, we do.
What is your theory on the sun? Because it's my understanding from reading Solaris that you think the history books are wrong.
Well, A lot of the main religions in the world started out as solar worship. The sun is one of the largest items or objects that we encounter on a daily basis. It is our main source of heat, light, nourishment. And without the sun, well, the earth would be a barren plain. Well, naturally, when the early man was forming early religion, we incorporated this great giver of light and heat and nourishment into our religions. Even in Christianity, we call Christ the Son of God. We focused on Mithraism. We focused on many other religions, Zoroastrianism, the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Druids also focused on this heavenly body as one of our main spiritual items. But in the past, in these ancient cultures, they believed that the sun was a conscious being. They believed that the sun could be communicated with, and they didn't just see it as heat and light and gas. And that fascinated me that as scientists, I consider myself a scientist, I'm board certified in medicine and psychiatry. I felt that we have disconnected ourselves from reality by overthinking and overanalyzing the main aspects of reality that are responsible for our lives, namely the sun. Mm-hmm. So in that way, I think that we've overlooked an important connection to the universe that I really feel should be examined more closely.
Okay, thank you. And what is it about the size of the sun? I believe that you stated it may be 32 miles in diameter. Is that correct?
Well, most ancient cultures don't look at the earth in the way that we look at the earth. We look at the earth as a ball of matter spinning in space, 24,000 miles in diameter, or in circumference. We believe that it is 93 million miles from the sun, but none of the ancient cultures believed that. If you look at the Mayans, the Aztec, even the Christian culture in the Bible, Judaism, many of the ancient cultures see the sun as being inside a firmament that is part of the earth. That's how the Bible calls the sphere or the shell that surrounds the earth. They call it the firmament. Okay. And oddly enough, scientists have discovered a shell or a dome-like structure in space that has been man-made, probably by our radio waves and by some of the energies that we have, that atoms hit into, electrons hit into, and smash and actually create a sound that they've recorded. And so we're looking at, does the sun exist in the way that we were taught? Is it 93 million miles away, or is it somewhat closer? And so in investigating that, I work with a number of my followers and people from different parts of the world. We found that you can actually communicate with the sun in a way that would not be possible if it were 93 million miles away. At 93 million miles, light requires about eight and a half minutes to go from the Earth to the sun, and then another 8.5 minutes to get back. But we have video recorded the sun responding instantaneously to some of the spiritual energies or work that we project outward into the sun, some of the spiritual sigils and energies that we put into the sun. The sun responds within seconds, not minutes. And in that response, we see that there's something else going on that should not be possible if the sun, were in the distance that we said it was. And some of the ancient texts, ancient adepts and mystics were able to make the sun spin in the sky. They were able to make it move back and forth. They were able to make it change color. And even in the early 1900s at Fatima, hundreds of thousands of people documented the sun moving in the sky, disappearing, coming back, changing colors, spinning, et cetera, et cetera. That wouldn't be possible if the sun were 93 million miles away. And then one of the seminal questions about where the sun is how does light get from the sun to the earth if the space intervening is dark and cold? How does that happen? So we look at the concepts that we've been taught. We look at the concepts of space and time and the sun and different planets. And I think we have to examine what is real and what is not real about the sun and the moon, and how our assumptions may need to be re-examined. Now, as a scientific culture, we don't like to re-examine our assumptions. We like to assume something and then try to verify it, regardless of the facts that come up in controversy to that. But in this particular case, we may have to look at the sun may not be 93 million miles away. It may be smaller and closer than we imagine.
Wow. So you and your followers were communicating with the sun and it was responding immediately.
We have hundreds of videos where the sun was responding by blinking in different patterns. And interestingly enough, the blinking patterns were different depending on the person causing the blinking. The sun changed color, it changed size, it changed shape, just like the ancient spiritual cultures wrote about. In the same way, when you use those same techniques, the sun responded in the same way.
Almost like that individual had a portion of their soul within the sun that was responding. Is that possible?
Yes, that each of us has, well, you have to look at the question, where does the soul come from anyway? Where does consciousness come from? Where does our intelligence come from? It has to generate from something. And the biggest, most obvious source, I believe, is the sun.
Indeed. Yes, yes. Okay, well then that would make sense. Personalization in response to the individual that's communicating with the sun.
When I wrote Solaris, one of the things that I did was I was able to astral project out of my body while looking at the sun. This is some certain solar practices that are listed in the book that allow you to project consciousness into the sun in the same way that the Mayans and the Aztecs and other cultures did. When you do that, you find that there are other consciousnesses inside the sun that you can communicate with in the same way that these ancient cultures talked about, that just makes a fascinating entree into intelligence that has a different definition than what we normally assume intelligence to be.
Thank you for explaining that. So the relationship between our eye and the sun, you mentioned that our eyes are like miniature suns. Could you elaborate a little bit on that for our listeners?
The eye is the only part of the body that is a direct extension of the brain itself. The eye is the only part of the body that gathers light, sends light into the brain. It helps to create an image that we can interpret as external reality. Without the eye, we would not be able to see color. We wouldn't know that color existed. So the eye is a part of our reality that allows us to interact with light and the sun in a way that we would not normally be able to interact with it. So in some ways, the eye is a miniature replica or miniature camera that gives us the gift of light, which kind of makes it like a sun.
And the sun that's absorbed by our eyes, what happens to it once it hits our retina?
Well, the brain never actually sees light. The brain is a dark place. When light hits the retina actually changes it into an electrical signal that then goes into the brain and is processed into what we call an image. But there's a delay. There's about a 0.2 of a second delay from what we see and the process of the retina then sending an electrical signal back into the occipital lobe where it's transformed into an image. But we never actually see reality or process reality the way that it looks. The brain changes it, the electrical signal changes it. So we lose a lot of data from what is actually there by our brain processing and reorienting the data that is transmitted through the eye from the retina.
Regarding the eyes transferring the energy, are there specific times of the day where it's better to look at the sun?
Let's just be clear. Looking at the sun can be dangerous. It can blind you. It can lead to different types of disorders in the eye, and it can damage your cornea, your retinas, etc. So it's something that I don't really recommend unless you have guidance in this. When I look at the sun, I recommend that it's something that I do when the sun is very gentle on the eyes, when the sun is red in color just at sunrise or sunset. If you look at it during the middle of the day when it's white or yellow, it can really damage the eyes. But as your eyes get used to sunrise or sunset, people have been looking at sunrise and sunset for as long as people have been on this world.
And your protocol for sun gazing is slightly different than HRM's. And I noticed that you incorporated images like 3 points on the sun that you would visualize as you were sun gazing, and then also other solar images. Where did you...
In the Solaris text, I talked about different areas of the sun that emanate different kinds of energy. And these different kinds of energies are mapped out in a number of ancient texts that I refer to that show that the sun has different regions of energy that emanate toward the earth, and these different regions that emanate energy toward the earth have been mapped. And you can, when you look at the sun, especially at sunrise, those images relate to 12 o'clock, the 12 o'clock position of the sun. If you relate the sun to the face of a clock, the 12 o'clock position, the 3 o'clock position, and the 9 o'clock position are very strong positions of energy being emanated from the sun that can be very beneficial to spiritual growth. I can say that before I started looking at the sun, my spiritual growth and consciousness were stagnant in comparison. There's just no comparison to how much I grew after I started looking at the sun.
How long did it take for you to notice the effects of your spiritual evolution from looking at the sun?
Well, I started looking at the sun initially when I was in college. I was a business major when I first started out, and then I found a book called Project X, which was written by Gene Savoy, who is one of the early pioneers in solar work that I took a real interest in. And he talked about looking at the sun at sunrise and sunset and how the energy from the sun could accelerate consciousness and even intelligence itself. So I started doing that. I was living in Florida at the time. And I noticed that my grades went up. I became bored with my major in business, so I changed to a somewhat more challenging major, pre-med, and I shot to the top of my class.
Wow.
During that time. And I graduated at the top of my class, and this was in college, so there were hundreds of people competing for that particular title. But I believe that taking in sunlight, working with the sun, helped me with that work. It helped me with some of the more challenging classes I had. Chemistry, some of the advanced biology courses, advanced mathematics. I took those with much more ease than I expected to.
How did the sun gazing relate to sexual energy?
Well, solar energy is, I think, the genesis of Kundalini. I believe that Kundalini energy is the energy that creates children, it creates creative power, and when you take in sunlight, you actually greatly amplify Kundalini energy in your body. Kundalini energy and sunlight are the same energies.
As you were sun gazing when you were in college, did you notice an increase in sexual energy per se?
Very much so. Very much so. But I decided when I was in my first and second years of college that I would delay any type of sexual activity until I got into medical school, because I grew up very poor, and I felt like if I was sexually active in that way, it would distract me from being able to finish my courses and get the grades that I needed. But that energy was still there, so I turned it into better grades. I turned it into the ability to do research. It really amplified the things that I could do.
Wow. And it seems like it was a catalyst of some sort it caused you to change your course of study from being business to pre-med. Almost
exactly.
Like it ignited something within you.
Exactly. And I continued doing that in medical school, but I really took it back up when I was in residency. And when I started taking in sunlight, the apartment that I was in actually happened to face due west. And there was another window that faced due east, so I could get in sunrise and sunset sun very easily. The ability to paint, the ability to write really took off when I started taking in sunlight from that perspective. And in the painting, my artwork has been sold. I've sold thousands of pieces of art all over the world. I'm in the Encyclopedia of Living Artists, New Art International, Art Miami. I won an art prize at the Museum of Fine Art in Paris. So the art, I believe, was catalyzed by taking in sunlight.
Quite impressive. These processes, or rather these hidden aspects of the sun, I'm aware of, from your reading, at least 5 components: information factors, universal forces, energetic factors, evolutionary factors, and enlightenment factors as well. And then
you've done your homework, I see.
Yeah, and then underneath those, there's other ways that they're broken up to, such as psi factor, B factor, et cetera, et cetera. How did you come across or discover these different components of sunlight?
Well, part of it are things that Gene Savoy wrote about in many of his texts. I took his solar rejuvenation course when I was in residency and in my first years of practice. And he talked about some of these things, but they weren't real to me because they were academic concepts that I had no real connection to.
Mm-hmm.
And then I began to research on my own the energies of the sun. I found that when you look at the sun isn't always the same throughout the course of a day or even throughout the course of a year. The solar energies change depending on when you look at the sun and what time of the day you look at the sun. The sun's appearance changes throughout the day, but I also found that the sun's energies change in a very subtle way throughout the day. And I started mapping these changes, and I found that in many cases, the things that he were talking about were accurate, but there were things also that he had not mapped that I was able to write down and begin to talk about as well, that there were energies in the sun, several different energies that came out in the morning, some energies that came out during the day, some energies that come out in the afternoon, and some very curious energies that come out toward the evening.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at plants have a very curious response where they will, if you allow a plant free access to the sun, a plant will follow the sun in the sky during the day. They will bend toward the sun in such a way that they can get maximum exposure to the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if an animal is ill, an animal will find a way to lie in the sun and focus the energy of the sun on the body or the part of the body that they feel is ill. So the animals and plants of the world know that something is going on with the sun, that humans have really not been studying in the same way.
But we're catching up, correct?
We're looking into catching up, I believe that, yes.
So some of these factors are considered negative that we receive from the sun, especially the midday sunlight.
Yes.
Elaborate a little bit on that, why it's considered negative?
Well, there are certain energies in the sun that can cause cancer. There are certain energies in the sun that can cause negative effects on consciousness. Y factor is one of them that can cause negative effects on the sun. Also, another factor called H factor, which is a factor that when you look at the energies of the sun, and if you have the hypothesis that the sun is the genesis of consciousness, you'll have to account for the different aspects of consciousness that we see in our daily lives. We see that consciousness has a positive aspect of creativity, but consciousness also has a negative aspect of creativity. Humans are a destructive race in many ways. We create bombs, we create guns, we kill each other, we create great items of beauty, but we also can be some of our own worst enemies. So I found that there are energies that emanate from the sun that can be connected to certain processes in consciousness that explain some of the things that we do that are positive and some of the things that we do that are negative.
And there was one factor which predisposes you to cancer, as you mentioned, and it was right next to another factor that gives us supernatural abilities. Is that correct?
There's a factor called X factor that has the ability to decode certain genes in the body that are normally dormant. And these decoded genes can turn on abilities that we normally just don't use in the same way. And that would be X factor.
Yes.
Another one is called B factor. B factor allows for consciousness to perceive multidimensional reality. Scientists now believe that reality is made of at least 11 dimensions, and B factor allows us consciousness and awareness of these 11 dimensions.
And if somebody was really interested in getting exposure to B factor and X factor, when would be a good time to sun gaze?
Those are most easily obtained at sunrise or sunset. X factor most easily in the morning, sunrise, and B factor most easily in the evening or sunset.
Okay.
Again, make sure that the sun is easy to look at. Make sure that it's red or orange, but not yellow or white. And if there's any discomfort, don't do it.
Don't do it. Okay. Perfect. You sent me a bunch of images, which I am going to share with our viewers. And I was wondering if you could just briefly describe what those images were. I know one of them was a map of the sun, but there were other images really hard for me to describe. Could you just tell us a little bit what they are and what they do?
You're talking about one that has a map of the sun?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's one of the maps that I got from an ancient text that talked about different areas of the sun and different types of energy and consciousness that emanate from those different areas. Where X factor comes from, where B factor comes from, where Y factor comes from, where B factor emanates into different dimensions. That's what that map is for.
Okay. So you would focus on those areas of the sun when you were.
Yeah, that information is actually given in our advanced solar course after people have gone through some of the basic work.
Okay, this one is the elementals file. And there's 3 bars, they're golden bars across the center, gray on both sides. And it looks like computer writing to me. I don't know how else to.
Okay, those are information factors that I recorded in my visions of looking at the sun.
Wow, they're so.
The sun emanates information and energy, and I'm able to see those after having looked at the sun for so long in front of me, and I just wrote down what I saw, and I turned it into something that looks like a piece of art, but that is actually what I saw.
Oh, quite amazing. That's all I can say. When you say elementals, what does that mean to you?
That when you look at the sun, you find very quickly that the sun interacts with you back and forth. It talks to you, it gives information to you, and it also accelerates your consciousness. In doing that, I found that there are beings inside the sun, a number of different types of beings, one of which being the solar elementals, beings that are made of light, but also have a consciousness that is different than that of human consciousness.
And so
I call them elementals, solar elementals.
And let's see, this one is the disease plate. And there's 4 different rectangles boxed together, black and white, and gold on top and bottom.
There are certain energies that emanate from the sun that can help with the consciousness of eradicating disease from your mind. Disease first begins as a concept of consciousness. We understand disease as something that ultimately affects the cells in the body, it affects the organs, it affects the blood. But before it can affect those areas, it begins as a concept and consciousness at the cellular level, affecting our DNA that then spreads out into the organelles, the organs of the body. So what you're looking at are places that helps us eradicate the spread of disease into different areas of the cells and in different areas of consciousness.
And the ancestor plate, it looks like a diamond, but in the shape of a square with 2 red, almost pyramids on the side, on either side.
The ancestral plate helps us communicate with people that are on the other side of consciousness after they pass from this world. It also helps us send them information and energy that they need once they leave this world. 75% of the world believes that our ancestors are still connected with us. I mean, the Western world is the other 20-25% for the most part. In the ancestral plate, it helps us connect with our ancestors by giving them food, by giving them money, by giving them clothing in an energetic form that they can receive and work with.
Interesting. Okay. And you have many more other plates that you sent me, but I don't think we'll cover them all, especially since I'm not able to bring them up on my screen at the moment.
Okay, I think you've done a good job there. Very good job.
Could you explain for our listeners what is the primordial sun and what is the galactic sun? And then our sun is the cosmic sun, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So when you look at the energy of the sun had to come from somewhere. The sun is connected to a different series of energies that go out into our domain, that go out into our universe, beginning with what we call the primordial sun. The primordial sun, let us call that the energy of the Big Bang. The Big Bang began reality as we know it as this self-generated spontaneous energy release that is still there, that still exists in the center of the universe. From the primordial sun, we get energy that comes in through the galactic sun, which creates galaxies. There are more galaxies than you could count very easily. But from the galactic sun, we then get stars being created from the energy of the central star, or the central sun in the center of our galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy has a sun in the center of, and our sun is believed to be in origin from that.
Okay. Are these illusions or are they very real bodies?
Now, you ask a very interesting question. Are they illusions or are they real? Right now, quantum physics believes that everything that we see and understand is an extension of consciousness. That consciousness creates the holograms that then become tangible reality as we know it, though reality, the tangibility of reality, is sort of an illusion in that nothing that we see exists in the way that we see it until we focus on it. That's a principle of relativity that Einstein discovered. And that was kind of hard for Einstein to believe, that the moon doesn't exist until he focuses on it, that nothing exists until you look at it. But when scientists did the famous double slit experiment, they found that atoms actually think. They make decisions about what happens and what is real, and those decisions are connected to our consciousness. So when you ask the question, are those real or are those illusions? In a very real sense, everything that we see is an illusion of consciousness. It's an illusion of consciousness until we decide what we're going to look at. And from that moment of decision, what we call reality comes into being.
They are real to us.
Well, they are real when we focus on them.
Okay. To the creator or
Yes.
How important is the pineal gland for our evolution, and how is it connected to sunlight?
The pineal gland is considered to be, by many ancient scientists and modern scientists, a very important gland in many aspects of hormonal balance in the body, and also in processing energy from other dimensions. The Egyptians felt that the seat of the soul was in the pineal gland, and it was also the seat of the third eye. They also called it the eye of Horus. Mm-hmm. In their beliefs, and many of the ancient cultures believed, there was the understanding that the pineal gland had an intricate connection between other dimensions of reality, sunlight, and higher consciousness. That when you took in sunlight, it had to be processed somewhere in the brain, and then that place that it was processed was the pineal gland. As it was being processed, the pineal gland then would connect consciousness with higher domains of reality and allow us to see and understand things that we could not see and understand without the pineal gland functioning in that way. As it functioned and expanded, it would release hormones and chemicals into the body that would expand and help the consciousness of the user grow.
The activity of the pineal gland would be amplified in someone that is sun gazing, correct?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. And back to the sun, I have a note here that the sun, our sun, the cosmic sun, is in the fifth dimension. And
yes.
Okay, so the beings that live there are actually in fifth dimension?
Yes.
Okay. As we evolve spiritually.
Well, humans are multidimensional beings. We have a dimensional existence in all the major dimensions. But certain beings have dimensional reality that is more concentrated in higher dimensions than ours. Our physical reality is what we consider to be our real self, our true bodies. But we have other levels of consciousness, other bodies and other places that are just as real as our physical body. The fifth dimensional existence in the sun is one of those places.
The galactic sun is another dimension, a higher dimension?
Higher dimension, let's put it that way.
And then the primordial sun is yet another dimension.
Higher dimension, let's put it that way.
Higher. Meridians and sunlight. I saw that there's something to do with acupuncture in certain spots in our body and a connection to sunlight.
So in the book Solaris, one of the things that I discovered is that once sunlight hits the body, it has to be distributed in the body. And when I looked at the acupuncture meridians and I looked at the energy of the sun, I found that the energy of the sun and the meridians of energy in the body that are acupuncture meridians have a very close connection, in that when you look at acupuncture meridians and you find that when you work with certain of these acupuncture meridians, you can actually you can cause sunlight to go into those meridians and energize the meridians with certain mudras and certain times of the day, that you can actually empower the meridians to be more active and hold more energy by connecting with sunlight consciously. There's an unconscious connection and we don't have to do anything with it. We can take in sunlight and that energy in that way. But when you start using certain mudras and connecting those mudras to specific acupuncture points, the way that we talked about in the book, it amplifies physical energy, creative energy, mental energy, sexual energy, all the main energies of the body.
Our light bodies, or our rainbow bodies, I've heard both terms, how are they related to sunlight?
You ask a very good question. The rainbow body is one of the great enigmas of our time. In the Dzogchen, which is probably one of the great traditions, one of the greatest traditions of transformation of the rainbow body, they have documented records in their temples of over 100,000 people transforming their physical bodies into energy, into light. In the Cathar tradition, in the Mayan and Aztec and ancient Egyptian, there's also records of people transforming their bodies by taking in sunlight into pure energy. Now, the light body is an aspect of our consciousness, an aspect of our being that is a real thing. When you learn to take in sunlight at a high enough level, it energizes the cells in the body in such a way that those cells amplify their resonance, their frequency, and transform purely into light. So the light body is energized by the food generated by the light of the sun.
Can anybody attain a light body? What is required? Is it a lengthy process over a lifetime, or is this something that we could just think about and poof, it happens?
It's a process that takes years. It's a process that takes focus, and one has to be taught. Anyone can do it. It is something that we all have access to, but it's not something that's going to happen just because you think about it. It's something that you have to be initiated into and then guided through.
Okay. Have you witnessed anybody go into their light body?
Yes, I have.
You have?
There are a number of videos that my wife and I have taken that show both of us transforming from energy, from physical matter into energetic matter and back again. There's a video that I put up on YouTube that shows my body, my wife's body, transforming from physical matter into energetic matter and back again. It's the doggonest thing you ever want to see, but you can see us phasing in that way. And we both have taken in sun for many years.
Amazing. Oh boy, I'm looking that up.
Yeah, it's called A Man Becomes Transparent, and you can see through us. And there's pictures that we put up on our websites, with pictures we put up on our Gandon area that shows us being transparent.
Wow. And again, you mentioned the sun gazing as a reason that you're able to do that, correct?
Yeah, we actually had to slow down our ability to our taking in the sun because we were starting to transform too fast. You could see us getting more and more invisible, and I didn't want to go that just well. I didn't want to do that just yet.
Okay.
But you can certainly see it.
You decided to stick around a while longer in the
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. We have 2 kids. I want to see my grandkids.
Okay, well, I'm grateful that you stuck around.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you've witnessed, experienced that you would love to share with our listeners, either regarding the sun or spiritual evolution, anything that you've seen or maybe you experienced with your wife?
There's so many.
So many.
So many. Let me see if I can just pick one. I think the process of looking at the sun and having the sun blink and speak to you is probably one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen. To see something as large as the sun, as powerful and as ancient as the sun, have a direct and personal communication with not only myself, but with hundreds and hundreds of my followers, that's just, to me, incredibly amazing. To see that, to witness it, to videotape it, is just absolutely incredible. To see the sun grow in the sky, to see it spin, to see it change color, that just fascinates me. To see that for myself, to see videotapes of it, to see actual proof of that. Absolutely amazing.
And is that available for viewing on YouTube as well?
There are some YouTube videos. We have a website called Gandon, thegandontemple.com. And that shows, we have hundreds of videos on that site. You have to join the site, but that's a site that you can see that phenomena in as much as you would like. The Gandon, Ganden, temple.com.
Is there anything else that you really wanted to get through to our listeners?
I think it's important for a person to get as much sunlight as possible. Open your windows in the morning if you can. All the light that comes into your house is solar light, and allow yourself to meditate during times when the sun is visible. We also have some videos on our website that have coded sunlight inside them. So if you don't get direct sunlight, you can use these videos on our tybro.com website that will allow you to get the energy of sun without the dangers of looking at sunlight or the dangers of too much sunlight during the day. I also think it's important that we take our consciousness a little bit more seriously. I think that we focus in many ways in this world on some of the wrong things about our lives. We focus on things that don't, in many ways, allow us to evolve and grow in ways that we really could evolve and grow. And I think that meditation, random acts of kindness, working with solar energy, working with other types of consciousness can help us evolve and grow. And I think those things are very important, that we don't give them the time and the energy and the focus and attention that we really should.
Okay, so to be present in your heart.
To be present in your heart and to be open to the concepts of sunlight.
Okay. How do you feel about sunscreen? Do you think that
sunscreen's important? I think it's important. Some people, most people that stay out in the sun too much actually need it. You will get a tan, you will get burned without sunlight, without the right sunscreen. But your body will change once you start taking in sunlight so that your body will adapt to solar energy. Up until the late 1900s, sunlight was a major treatment. Sun spas, solar energy was a major treatment for many things. And there were European sun spas that helped people with tuberculosis and many different types of disease. They're not as popular now since the advent of antibiotics and chemicals. But in many ancient times and up until the late 1900s, sunlight was used as a treatment for many different things.
Yeah, I believe it was called heliotherapy.
Heliotherapy, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on eating a raw diet to access more solar energy?
I agree with eating a raw diet to a certain extent, though it's probably not for everybody. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the concepts of food, over time, some people will try different types of food and diet. I, at one time, was a vegan. I, at one time, tried raw diet. But I found that you got to listen to your body when your body tells you what you need. Listen to your body when it tells you it needs water, when it needs protein, what type of protein you need to take in. Listen to the energies that your body says, I need these things now.
Well, our time is just about up. So, Dr. Gibson, I'd like to ask you one more time if there's any final messages that you would like for our listeners to hear from you, or if there's any information that you'd like to share?
We have a number of different avenues that people can connect with us. They can go to our main website at tybro.com, and there we have audio recordings, we have video material that people can get to, we have books, we have medallions, we have what we call power books or tablets that people can use to help advance their work. We also have a website that is free called Gandon, thegandontemple.com, where you can interact with hundreds of people who are really serious about their spiritual work and their spiritual growth. We have an Instagram page. Just look up my name, Mitchell8999, on Instagram. And we have a blog that we keep up pretty regular called The Enlightened Perspective, where we have hundreds of articles. And right now we have about 600,000 followers that are working with us on that particular blog, The Enlightened Perspective blog on WordPress.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you to you and Kathy.
Thank you so much.
For all the work that you are doing and sharing with humanity. It's amazing.
Thank you for having me on my show, and maybe we can do this again sometime. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Gibson. You have a wonderful day.
Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye, everybody.